So that was even a more appropriate intro than I had expected, because on that Talkeetna River, I spent maybe 4 minutes in front of the group swimming the Class 4 canyon, so they weren't aware that I was swimming. And it's actually not funny. Like, that's a pretty scary scenario to be in. And that's really what I'm going to go through here. I was torn. I kind of suspect I was invited because people wanted to hear about motivating trips, and I'm going to show a couple trip reports, but mostly I'm going to talk about what I think is missing, and it's this safety component. I feel really lucky in my own evolution, and I'll be talking about it, to have had a safety net of people like Roman, Brad, and especially the kayakers in Anchorage that took us under their wings. But I do feel pretty lucky, and I think a lot of people here can probably relate to having close calls. So I'm going to go into why we're having close calls, what we can do differently, and I'm going to make a pitch that we should be doing something differently. So can you hear me well enough on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's late and I'm a little bit tired, and if you get tired, it's dark, so I won't really know who gets up and leaves, so I won't be offended. I know some people in the back were looking for people that they couldn't find in the dark. Do you want to take care of that real quick? Is anybody homeless? Partnerless? Okay, so we're all set? Okay, I'm going to try to control this from my phone, and I haven't tried this before. So I used to be a little bit of a science dork, and the title here, this zeroth law, is one of my two favorite things in science. This is my other favorite thing. So an ohm is a unit for resistance, electrical resistance, and it's this capital omega. And the inverse of resistance is conductivity. And these guys put their heads together and came up with this brilliant way to describe units of conductivity, which was just to flip the letters around. An ohm became a mo, and you flip the capital omega upside down. My other favorite thing in science was this zeroth law, because it's just like, you know, a lot of thermodynamicists were brewers back in the day, and they had access to these vats, and that's where they were doing these experiments. And they had a first law, and they had a second law, and they had a third law, and like 40 years later, somebody was like, oh shit, we forgot something that's even more fundamental, and they're just like, whatever, zeroth law, let's just slide it in there. So I like that creativity. You're able to kind of buck the system a little bit, and that's kind of what I'm hoping we can do with safety. We can kind of look back. We've matured a lot. I've matured a lot in 10 years. The sport, I know, has been around longer than that, but I think it's time to slip in this zeroth law. So basically, I'm going to try to present to you, I feel like we're missing something. I feel like there are some red flags. I'll share those flags. And I've got some ideas about what we can do now to cover ourselves a little bit better. And this interest for me came largely out of the drowning of Rob Kerr. There have only been 2 fatalities that I know of in pack rafting, which is kind of amazing, given how many of us there are and how many of us get into water over our head early in our boating careers. Rob was a good friend, and Rob hated water. His wife told me they went to vacation in Hawaii, and he wore a life vest on the beach. So just super uncomfortable with water. But he loved Alaska's wilderness. He loved traveling across the landscape, and as you all know, doing that in a pack raft can be fun, it can be scary, it can be really effective. He was more into the effective, the efficient part of that. And I wonder, what could we as a community, as a culture, have done differently to have made some of his mistakes seem ridiculous? Like, wouldn't it be interesting if, as a culture, we all knew the buoyancy of our PFDs? And I don't, but maybe that's something we should think about. And if Rob had a more buoyant PFD on this trip, things might have ended up differently. So a little bit about my evolution. I quit being a science dork, and I became an ultralight weight dork, and This was one of my early trips, and I'm just making a lot of mistakes, but learning by mistakes, and I really like that process. I liked it in academia, and I liked it in the mountains. This was on a glacial river, and I thought, well, I'm going to get wet anyway, so maybe I'll just wear shorts, which meant that I was like hypothermic. And while I'm hiking, I don't really want to carry a full PFD. I'll just carry this one from the airplane. So, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do things like this. I love the innovation of pack rafting, but everything we're doing is kind of a risk-reward balance, right? And I spend a lot of time evaluating risk, especially after losing somebody like Rob. And my interest in pack rafting, I'm going to assume it's similar for most people here, most pack rafters. And I know it's not true for everybody, but it was as a way to explore, a way to adventure. I was coming from a backpacker's background, not a water sport background. And I had drawn lines on maps, and I thought, wouldn't this be a cool way I can hike in and float out? But it was really more about access than about water. And a lot of the water looked like this. I'm the one sleeping on the right. We just took turns sleeping. This is class 1 water, big river in Alaska, approaching the Kuskokwim. And then, largely through my friendship with Brad and Roman, I started to be introduced to this other water that just kind of blew my mind. And these other scenes, I'm a very visual person, so these landscapes like canyons, and most canyons aren't class 1 water. And so I began a progression of getting into bigger and bigger water. And this was a really rewarding process for me. It just kind of opened up another aspect of the landscape, to a limit where we were just doing kind of silly things. And a lot of things we were doing that were probably higher risk than they were reward. I've got the video equivalents of these progressions. I'm just going to show 2 videos. The first one here it's one of my first videos ever, and it's crappy quality, and I usually don't want to show it because I'm kind of embarrassed of the quality now. But the next one's, I think, one of my best ones. So you'll get to see how I've changed as a paddler and as a videographer. This is, I think, maybe 4 minutes or so. It's going to take me a second to get the audio, I think. One thing that stands out to me in this video is So this is kind of the end of my first season, kind of thinking like I know what I'm doing. We're in a lot of Class 4 water. We're swimming a lot of Class 4 water, as you can see. And that one shot where it's like, learn to brace. You see that his paddle is vertical, and I thought I knew what a brace was. I thought it meant your paddle was vertical. And it's taken me like 5 years to learn how to brace since then. That wasn't a brace. Everybody that's been in the Swiftwater classes, we've talked about bracing, right? And it's a flat slap on the water. And just taking a lot for granted and pushing our limits and not always doing the right thing. But again, super fortunate to have, you saw a handful of clips in here that had safety. Guys with throw ropes, a couple shots with kayakers downstream. So this next video is sort of where I'm at in my evolution as a boater, and it's a way to combine my interest as a backpacker, as a hiker, with my new respect and interest in rapids and in whitewater. And it's a trip to Iceland, so we were able to do some hiking, or in this case skiing, and then get on some legitimate tough kind of full-on Class 4 big volume water. And it took me until last year to get comfortable with a trip like that. This one's 10 minutes, and I have to turn the volume down because of quiet hours, but it's narrated. So do with that what you can. I can try to. When we arrived at the river, James got in his boat for the first time. He hadn't been in a pack raft, and he tightened down his thigh straps and rocked back and forth a little bit on the shore. It was rainy. We were pretty wet, but he had a huge grin on his face, and he looked up at me and he said, "This is not shit."
Now then, my first ever sit in an alpaca raft, and it actually looks like you can do things with it. I'm very impressed.
To use pack rafts was Dan's idea, and James was along for the ride, but he wasn't convinced it was the right way to go. I met Dan 2 years ago in India, in Meghalaya, and Dan was friends with James. When we were in India, Dan proposed that crossing Iceland would be kind of the ideal test of these pack rafts for the alpaca boats. He was really interested in doing it by going over the ice. He hadn't been on skis before, so that was exciting for him. But we made it happen, pulled in James. I flew over from Alaska. We met in Reykjavik. Dan and James both showed up with boots that they'd never worn before and skis that were already out of fashion when I was in high school. We took a bus from Reykjavik to Jökulsárlón. That's a glacial river lagoon in the southeast corner of the island. And arrived at midnight, it was in the rain, couldn't see anything, couldn't see our ice approach. I was nervous about the route. We were on bare ice for the first couple of days, about 15 miles. But the cracks were really friendly. They were open kind of like V's rather than slots. So the hazard of slipping and falling into a crack wasn't that great. We were able to just walk through with crampons and eventually got to snow line and roped up, and we were able to move a little bit faster in the snow, but really not much just because it was so soggy, so wet. And then my ski broke, and there was just fog the whole time. It was pretty brutal. Basically, we were navigating by GPS and compass, and so just head down looking at the compass for 3 days straight. The highlight of being on the ice was getting off the ice. We dropped below the clouds. We could see interior Iceland for the first time. It was skiable. James was able to rip down and make turns. Dan did some snow plowing at the top. Remember, he's never been on skis. And I was able to kind of falling leaf my way down with the one ski just taped together.
Land. Oh! And it's even harder to walk on.
So we made it. We put in on the river, and we were psyched, all smiles, 3 miles, you know, finally letting gravity do some work for us. But pretty soon the channel braided out into too many braids, so we packed up our stuff and walked to the next main channel. Got in that one, we were psyched, all smiles again, we're making good time. And then that one also braided out, got too thin. In that case, it was because there was a fresh lava flow, like really fresh, like last year fresh. It was still steaming. That had changed the course of the river. We hopped up on the shore and walked to the steam. That was really cool. There were jeep tracks that were truncated by the lava. It was so fresh, so raw. This part of the island was just lunar, just absolutely foreign. No plants, like not even lichen. So we're at the steam vents, and we got to pack up the boats one more time, head west to the next main channel. And this one on the map, this is supposed to be the main channel. And we get to it, and it's awesome. It's clear. It had been particularly cold this summer, so there wasn't that much glacial silt in the river. And the nature of the river for the next couple of days was flat, not meaning slow, but just calm water, meandering a bit, and then a nasty, steep waterfall drop. Most of those we walked just the drop part, and then we're able to put in below where it canyoned out, and there would be some nice big water, class 4 standing waves and rapids, and those were all super fun. On one evening, the rain turned to snow. Pretty late at night, we're ready to get off the water, and it starts to snow, and we see this shelter, this box structure, and this whole time Dan had been talking about these mystical emergency shelters that Iceland has all over, but we haven't seen any. So we get there, and it's not an emergency shelter, it's a weather station, and it's just like almost too much to handle. We were so cold and miserable at this point. So we poke around the weather station a bit, and eventually figure out we can jimmy the lock and go inside and move like a nitrogen tank around, and there was a seismometer. It really didn't look like it was functional, this weather station. But if it was functional, it got some weird measurements while we were in there. And we just sardined in, and it was so nice. We woke up in the morning, there was 3 inches of snow. This is mid-July. Just kind of unacceptable in my book. Pretty soon we're coming up to these gnarly waterfalls, like 11 meters, 30 meters, 45 meters. And we know they're coming, and they're pretty easy to see. Probably half a mile away we could see the first mist, plume of mist coming off this waterfall. We just decided to portage the whole chunk. That was about 6 miles that we walked. And we pushed late into the night that night to just get it done with, do the whole portage, so in the morning we could raft the canyon. So this canyon was awesome. It was sustained, class 4. It's what I had been nervous about the whole trip. And the reason I feel pretty comfortable in class 4, but this big water stuff is different. It's like you are supposed to go in the meat of the rapid. Like you go in the middle where it looks the burliest, which is just not intuitive for me. So these guys would get me lined up, and I'd just follow their tail through. And I would go into these rapids thinking, you're kidding me, right? Like, there's no reason I should be right here. Like, why aren't we off on the side skirting this? But if you're on the side, you're into all these weird eddies and whirlpools, and the water is climbing and dropping. If you're in the middle, there are these big wave trains, but it was a beautiful canyon, like these incredible basalt cliff walls with all this columnar jointing. Like, you could not have asked for a more beautiful setting for that water. We finished with a pretty painful 10 miles of flat class 1 water just to get to the beach, and Dan jumped in. James and I are just kind of over it. One of the coolest things about this trip is sort of the reminder of how much my motivation to adventure is driven by wanting to learn and wanting to improve. Even though the weather was crap and we couldn't see the scenery for the first half of the trip, it was awesome to sort of push my comfort zone a little bit and come out of that feeling like a better paddler.
Thoughts on Iceland, James?
Thoughts on Iceland? I should have known, the clue being in the name, that it was going to be very cold, but it surprised even me. Extremely cold. Mid-July. Mid-July. Do you know what? Do you know what I really miss? Fog. Really miss fog. I wish we'd seen some fog on this trip.
Okay, so that's my evolution so far. I'm looking forward to learning more. It was awesome to go with these guys. They were basically, I guess not pro, they're lifestyle kayakers, meaning they just work job to job so they can kayak as much as possible. And it was awesome to learn from them. So I want to transition into these kind of specific red flags. The first one being that where I'm coming from, and I think where a lot of us are coming from, we're in the boat without really acknowledging that we're doing a water sport, right? Like, I'm in the boat as a backpacker. I'm in the boat as a fat biker or something, and it's not really in the water for the sake of the water. And I'll try to use that term a bunch in the rest of this. Water for the sake of water. I think maybe Sarah Histand. I don't know if I said this or Sarah. I kind of want to take credit for it, but I didn't know, so I put it in quotes so it could be hers. New pack rafters tend to run water like they run trails. Find a line and follow it. As opposed to kayakers. I reached out to a lot of resources to come up with what I should talk about here and get insights from different boaters. And I have an audio clip from Paul Schauer, one of my friends and boating mentors in Anchorage. And this is Paul talking about water.
What I love most
boats.
about paddling is balancing the river's energy with your own. To me, paddling is an intricate balance between you and the river. You can't overpower the river. You have to stay humble and balance your power with every little current. It doesn't matter if you're running class 5 or surfing a wave. Either way, you have to find a balance with the river's power and your own, and learn how to use the river's power to accomplish what you want to do.
So I just want to point out, he says like river, current, surf, wave. He's using all these terms to describe water, and I'm thinking miles, backpack, like 6 miles an hour, canyon, landscape. So we're coming from really different. I'm coming from a really different background than somebody like Paul, and I'm kind of asserting that the rest of us here are as well. The rest of you. So that's the first red flag. My second red flag is that the boats are really stable. They're class 4 capable quickly, and so new boaters can get in a pack raft and get in water that's over their skill level. And it's hard for me to be up here talking about safety and not sound preachy. I really don't want to sound preachy. And again, this is my evolution as a boater, and assuming it applies to. Maybe it would help me to get a little like. Is this resonating with anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. How many people are coming into boating more as a backpacker than in the water? Backpackers? Maybe look around so you can. So this isn't just for me. Water for the sake of water. Okay, minority for sure. in over their head. Not that many. Good for you. So early in the evolution of these boats, they weren't designed well enough to get into gnarly water. Maybe these guys could run some rapids, but it wouldn't be. This is Dick Griffith.
Yeah.
And then, 10, 15 years later, we're in these boats. This is James on that Iceland trip. Boom, ready to go. So well designed. So that's my second flag. My third here is a rapid growth in popularity. This is especially true in Alaska. I talked to the Alaska Kayak Academy. It's kind of the go-to place for new boaters. Asked him what the ratio of new pack rafters to new kayakers was. It's 20 to 1. 20 to 1, that's huge. It means that, at least in the Alaska community, tons of people are getting introduced to a water sport, assuming they're coming into it like most of us as backpackers. They're not coming into it necessarily for their interest in water. I don't see any reason why this popularity trend wouldn't expand. It's already here. I mean, what does Alaska have? It's got Roman's videos. It's got a bunch of established routes. Jackson's got that now, right? Bozeman's getting that. Like, a bunch of communities are getting that. So the boats are fun. They're the same price as a kayak. They're super stable. You can carry them. They appeal to backpackers. It just seems to me like this is going to explode. So I love these aspects of our culture, our innovation, our exploration, our sense of adventure. But I think, given these 3 red flags, we really have to acknowledge some responsibility for new boaters. Why are you laughing? You can tell me. I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that nobody's laughing. You don't have to answer that.
You're laughing at the TFD.
Thank you. McCarthy or bust. Yeah. Everything's a risk evaluation, right? So I think this is what we need to do. We need to develop this pack rafting culture of safety. And from here, I did some research. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's tons of water sport pros that have been around for hundreds of years. Not maybe the pros, but the sports. And so I wanted to see what the kayakers had figured out. And I did a ton of research. I totally geeked out on this. I read a master's thesis about an anthropology. It was like Class 5 boaters and American culture. And I talked to a bunch of the kayakers in Anchorage, and they talked to their friends back in the southeast. And I collected a bunch of feedback from these guys. And this is my synthesis. This is basically like 50 years of kayaking limited into 3 bullets. There's obviously a lot more to this. The kayaking community, in my opinion, and again, I know people here in the audience know a lot more about this than I do. My take on it. Kayakers there, it's water for the sake of water. They're interested in the water. So all of a sudden they're coming in with a different headspace than what we've got. Right? Nobody buys a canoe and thinks, I can't wait to carry this around. This is going to be awesome. But we do. We're like, yes, I am going to carry this boat 50 miles. That is going to be sweet. The kayaks are unstable. And so you can't just jump in a kayak and get on Class 3 water. You can, and you dump right over instantly. And so the boats limit your progression rate. And you could, in 1 or 2 seasons, if you really worked hard to it, get up to be a Class 4 boater. But you'd have to build a lot of skills to get there. This third one's the big one. So starting in the 70s, but then especially in the 80s and 90s, the fatalities just racked up. And the risk was very much in the face of the boaters. It started as a small enough community that everybody kind of knew each other, like maybe where pack rafting is maybe just coming out of now. A lot of people that were high-risk boaters had lost friends and then ended up becoming gear designers, making safer vests, making safer boats. So it took a lot of accidents for the kayaking community to build this culture of safety. And what I mean by that culture of safety is that now new kayakers get on the river and there's a support group. There's some sort of knowns their culture didn't really develop until they had all of these fatalities. So we've had 2 that I know of. Let's skip the rest and let's just jump to this culture of safety. And then the rest of the talk, it gets text heavy. I know it's late. You don't have to read the words. I'll tell you the point. They're mostly to cue me because I've got a lot I'm trying to say. Oh boy. It is pretty hot out right now, isn't it? What can we do now to develop a culture of safety? I think it's probably going to be okay. I'm going to keep going just because it's so late. One thing I think we can do is get better at recognizing our limitations as the paddler. So a couple questions I think about, and I've seen around on the internet for kayaking. It's just about pack rafts. What's the difference between making it through a Class 4 section and being a Class 4 boater? A lot of people can get down a river. That doesn't mean they're in control the whole time. It's been kind of a renaissance for me to switch my mentality in the water and now try to play feature to feature. And I've been doing it with the Swiftwater class. We'll be doing it again tomorrow. And it's kind of blowing my mind. There's all this stuff going on the river that I hadn't really paid attention to before because I was just like 5 miles an hour. Sweet, we're going 6 miles an hour. This is awesome. Now I'm changing it and I'm going 5 miles an hour maybe. And I'm like, dang, that looked like is this smoking? Or is that the fire? That's the fire. Another thing I think we should think about is to recognize the difference between what the boat is capable of versus what the paddler is capable of. I saw this on a forum. Luke Mel's modifications: thigh strap, seat forward, double seat, stiffer paddle. Give more boat control and will bring your paddling up a grade without really trying. I got stuck on this. I'm the one that bolded that part. So by changing that equipment, did that make me a better paddler? No way, right? It just made my boat better. But by changing that equipment, it allows me to learn paddle technique, to learn how to lean, to brace. And that leads me to my next thing that I think we can do as a community. I think we should be outfitting the boats so that they promote skill development. I think the manufacturers are doing us a disservice by not including at least thigh strap attachment points, by not elevating the seats. I think everybody, especially women, should be using shorter paddles. In these instructional courses, I'd say usually about 25% of the boaters come in, and it's kind of like a kid sitting in a bathtub. Your elbows are really tall, you're sitting down low in the boat, and you got this huge sea kayak paddle. And in that position, you can't lean forward. You can't use your abs to get any torque out of that paddle stroke. And I want you to be able to do that. I want to be able to do that. That's what I'm working on, so that I have the paddle technique to get me into that eddy, to peel out into that rapid. I also think we can include more safety practices in our media. So I've spent a lot of time in my videos cropping out the safety because it just looks like a cleaner shot if you don't see somebody standing down there out of their boat or a kayaker waiting for me at the bottom of this pool. And I think that's a little bit of a disservice. You see Roman's highlight reels, and what you don't see is 3 kayakers there saving our butts. And that's a pretty easy thing that we can all start to include. There are some examples, the Pack Rafting 101, 201 series that came out, awesome videos showing technique. I've seen a couple videos where guys have had a GoPro on a throw rope, and so you get this kind of cool view of a throw rope getting thrown through the air. Those are just nice features that new boaters can watch and be like, what is that rope for, right? Or why is that kayaker sitting down there doing this with his head? Just things that we could easily slip into our media. We are so good at creating media, right? Is there any sport that can compete with with pack rafters for sort of self-promotion? And I mean, this is me talking about myself here. Videos and trip reports and photos. Another thing I think we can do is reevaluate how we learn. And I've got an audio for this too. This is Paul Schauer again.
I'm extremely fortunate to learn the way I did. I learned from my dad, and I grew up on and around the river. Learning from my dad made it so that I didn't have any say in what I got to do. My dad made it so that I never progressed above my skill limit. When I wanted to paddle the hardest stretch on the Ninana, my home river, he said I couldn't do it until I could paddle the hardest rapid on the easier stretch backwards, trying to surf every wave. So the next time I ran that stretch, I ran it backwards, trying to surf every single wave, and I got my butt kicked. And by the time I could do that, my dad let me paddle the canyon stretch, and it was easy and not scary at all. I was really lucky to learn that way. I learned by making hard moves in easy whitewater, and personally I think that's key to learning successfully.
So I know that's an end member scenario, right? His dad is a whitewater guide, but it's an awesome scenario. It's really cool. I think that's pretty inspiring. I don't know of any of my pack rafting friends that can relate to that, but maybe we should. I think having role models is really healthy. The formal courses are already popular. I think the Swiftwater one this weekend had a 20-person wait list. So that's awesome. We're already doing that well. But that only reaches people where they're offered, and it costs a bit of money. You're probably already pretty well invested in the sport. So I think in addition to those formal courses, we should pursue informal courses. And this is really the big one for me, and I'll spend a little more time on it with specifics. My progression with these courses is that I took one here, not here, it was in Alaska, but it was with Swiftwater's Safety Institute with Riley. Right after that, Brad Micklejohn and I turned around, went to India, and taught the same curriculum there to a group of proto-guides. And since then, I've been sort of evolving that curriculum, removing a bunch of the technical aspects and adding more like paddle basics and how to deal with a pack raft specifically. So what it's looking like now, this is a short version here, is basically we cover equipment, boat rigging, throw ropes, swimming, wet reentry, foot entrapment, shallow water crossings, river hazards like wood. And then we spend a lot of time in the water, and we do rescue scenarios. This is familiar to everybody that's been in these Swiftwater classes. Somebody falls out of your boat and tosses their paddle 20 feet downriver, and somebody else gets the boat, etc. But just getting people comfortable with the swimming scenarios, because we swim a lot as pack rafters. We swim a lot. Really? Yep. Something that's working really well is this sort of mother goose mode, and we'll just have somebody up front leading. It usually works well to have 2 or 3 boaters behind the leader, and they'll just run the river feature to feature, kind of like what Paul was talking about. Catch this wave facing upstream before you cut over to this eddy. And the eddies are key to me. There's this, as an instructor, one of the rewarding parts is when you see somebody get that aha moment. And the way that I'm seeing that the most is when people catch the eddy, come in with some heat, they hit it at 45 degrees, they bury that paddle blade on the inside corner, lean into it, and the boat just cranks into the corner, loses all its speed. And when you first feel that, it's like, whoa, okay, that's what it was supposed to feel like. It's the same sensation you get on skis when you're carving correctly, right? It's like, aha, okay, that's what it's supposed to feel like. And not only that, but I feel like it kind of opens your horizons to be like, I don't need to just be bombing down this river. I don't need to just get through it. There's a sweet little eddy here I can catch. Oh, there's a little wave over there I can play on. And hopping from feature to feature. So I've done a few of these informally. The first one was a group of 5. And then a year later, this is word of mouth. Starting with a group of friends is like, hey, can we go over some Swiftwater basics? We had 50 people show up. It took 2 work evenings, like 3-hour blocks, and then a full day Saturday. So it was low investment for me. These have all been co-taught with Tony Pirelli, one of my good friends. not that much work for us, but it reached a lot. Coast to coast, California, Maine, Idaho, Colorado, Utah, Spain. You know, what if even half of us went back to communities? I don't even think you need to know what you're doing. I think if you just go there and dedicate some time to being like, let's play with things, let's try this, let's set up some safety, see what happens. I think that's just going to set us up for a general sort of culture of safety. New boaters are going to get in and see that and be like, there's something here about throw ropes I need to know before I even consider Class 3 water. So this is it. This is my conclusion. We totally rock. These boats totally rock. I'm psyched about the sport. I'm psyched about this community. I think we've matured to the point where we need to take responsibility for where it's going and for the new boaters that are coming in. These are the things I've identified. I think there's a lot more. If nothing else, I hope this spurs conversation. In case you can't read this here, recognizing your limitations, outfitting the boats so that they promote skill development, including more safety practices in our media, and reevaluating how we learn. Thinking about our role models, thinking about our progression, thinking about these formal courses, and especially thinking about some informal courses or workshops, things that we can do, groups of friends, 4 people, 50 people, whatever you can pull together in your community. It's easy to pull in these technical guys like Riley, Scott Sully, if you want more technical trainings, but I don't think it has to be that. That was perfect timing. I don't know what happened, but that was it.